No, 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 he has these big German glasses. He studied combustion. Why would he study combustion? Why would he have an electrical car? He was analyzing my gasoline. I could tell me it was react.
Hello, everyone. Hello. 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 Hey, you guys.
Hello, hello.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year for everybody.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. Look who's there. My in-laws. That's amazing. Hold on. That's so cool. I hope it's them. David? David? Oh my God, what a surprise. Yay. Well, we'll see. Are you guys? How's everybody?
Okay, I think I'll have to put the.
There's not the arm over there. Let's see the head. I see. Okay, all right. But, oh, and she's looking towards us. Oh, I think it's.
Okay. We're gonna start. People walk in or drop by. Myself, I didn't think of what did we do last week, and I'm thinking about the dreidel, and I think we're a little bit like in this. I feel like if I were to think through like the type of material that we somebody mute themselves, I don't know.
Okay.
But I feel like I hear something in the background and I get very, very distracted very easily. So sorry. So I'm thinking that if I were to think of like a one kind of like thing or an Iniyan, a topic that is keeps on coming up in our group is this idea of like the up and the down and the being in both places at the same time, like in the story of the Oreach, the story that we saw about the guest, and also last week when we were talking about the dreidel and this movement that Rabbi Nachman was describing about what is up goes down and what goes up goes down goes up, that kind of fluidity of existence, of that capacity for things to shift fundamentally is something that keeps on appearing in every session, and it's not in on purpose. It just keeps on happening, and I'm just kind of listening to that and like recognizing that it, in some way that's coming through. And today I think we're continuing a little bit that a similar topic in a very different perspective, or like from a different corner. And it's a beloved Torah of mine. It's one of the first Torahs that I learned in Likutei Moharan. And again, the experience of learning Likutei Moharan is always an experience of like accessing the text in layers. Like every time I encounter the text, I see something else. I can like understand a little bit deeper, maybe a little bit more broader. It's like a different learning, and I'm excited for the opportunity to do that with you guys. And today is just a short Torah, so we're going to see for the first time, which I think is also valuable for you guys to see the arc of how Rabbi Nachman begins and teaches a Torah. And something that is extremely interesting about this Torah that I really is one of the things that first drew me in a very serious way to Breslov Chassidut is the combination that Rabbi Nachman often kind of like exemplifies, which is using life, using experiences from life, using the experiences from his Hasidim to bring forth a Torah, like a concept or a teaching, in a very kind of like integrated way. And it happens very often. I think I spoke to you guys in the past about Rabbi Nachman asking from his Hasidim, please give me the news, I cannot live without the news. Needing constantly to be in relationship with the world as is. And this story is about that. It's about how are we in relationship with the world as is. And it's interesting because I saw when I was kind of like looking at the text before the session that I somehow, I don't know what happened, but I didn't put the title in the source sheet that you got. And the title, I couldn't come up with a better title, but it was like Iniyan legamre, which is one of the expressions of this Torah. Iniyan acher legamre means a different thing altogether. And that's the concept that he's going to be exploring and redefining in a certain way that I think it will be very useful. And I think it's very useful for anybody that is in a spiritual quest. Iniyan acher legamre, a different thing altogether. So having said that and kind of like introduced the lesson, the short lesson, which I hope we'll be able to see fully. Let's just take a second to kind of like sink in this new year. Should be a year of blessing. It should be like a year of like things turning in unexpected and good directions. We should do our part and feel that we're doing our part in it. So let's just kind of like sink in, sink into the present moment and take a couple of minutes to arrive. So I'm just going to be quiet for a couple of minutes and then we'll begin. When you're ready to come back, just noticing your environment, noticing your body in space. Open your eyes. It's good to see you guys. Okay, so hoping everybody has the texts. Since I can't really share screen, so it's so. As I said before, this lesson is interesting because it's drawn from an experience that Rabbi Nachman had when he visited the land of Israel. It's an incredible story. The story of it's called the Nesiya, the travel of Rabbi Nachman to Eretz Israel. Full of adventures in the middle of the Napoleonic Wars. He set to come to the land of Israel. It took him, I think a couple of months to get here. And then it's a very amazing story that I really like. He came with an assistant. And when he landed in Akko, in north of Haifa. And as soon as he landed and he walked, and after it, stories of pirates, like all kinds of incredible stories to get here. It took a long time. It wasn't like just taking a flight like immediate travel, but it was like long months of travel and adventures. And as soon as he landed and he took 3 steps, I think, in the land, he said, okay, I'm ready to leave. And his assistant says, ready? We spent a couple of months, like it's been a lot of effort to get here. Can we please, not leave? And Rabbi Nachman said, if you insist, we will stay. And then he stayed longer. He visited Haifa, he visited Tiberias. He didn't make it to Yerushalayim, but they stayed, if I believe correctly, until Purim the following year. So he came right before Rosh Hashanah, spent Rosh Hashanah, I think. No, he came after Pesach. He spent the Chagim here, Sukkot. And I don't know if he spent Hanukkah here or not, but he traveled around then back after that. So the reason why I'm telling you that story is because there's something about Rabbi Nachman that I always try to kind of remember when I get tight about something. How Rabbi Nachman used to say, I never mitakesh, I never like force myself or like force things in any way. He was very known to kind of like, okay, if you think we should stay longer, we can stay. And we're talking about, right, this Rebbe that spent, that has a very clear sense of what his purpose is and his, spiritual stature is. And yet is able to say, okay, if you want to stay longer and visit the land and walk around the land and spend time here, we can do that. So I think it's one of those like very fundamental, like important thing to know about Rabbi Nachman is that he never, I don't know how to say litakesh, but like he never like, forced himself on anything. So this story is this Torah comes as a result of his visit to the land of Israel, and he's going to take that as a jumping point, right, from that experience to teach something about this thing of Iniyan legamre. How do we relate to things that are holy in this world? So Rabbi Nachman, let's see, I would like to read it in Hebrew because the Hebrew is like really, I don't know, somehow it evokes a different type of experience of learning for me, especially when it's the text of Likutei Moharan. So I'm going to try my best to continue in doing the translation. And if I see that I'm going to run out of time, I will move to the English. So סיפר כשהיה בארץ ישראל, סיפרו לו שם החשובים שהיו שם, שבאו ממדינות אלו וקבעו דירתם שם בארץ ישראל כמפורסם. So when Rabbi Nachman visited the land of Israel, the people that were there, the important people that were there, that came from the lands of, I think, Europe, and established their places of life, established themselves in Eretz Israel, they said, שקודם שהיו בארץ ישראל, that before they arrived in Eretz Israel, לא היו יכולים לצייר לעצמם, they were not able to picture for themselves, שארץ ישראל היא עומדת בזה העולם, that Eretz Israel stands in this world, והיו סבורים שארץ ישראל הוא עולם אחר לגמרי. And they were convinced that the land of Israel is a place, is something entirely different. לפי גודל קדושת ארץ ישראל המבואר בספרים, because of the way that Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, is described in the holy books, the high levels of kedusha, of holiness, that Eretz Israel is described in the holy words. So I'm just going to pause here for a second, just to kind of like, with you, before we move on, unless you have already done so, but at least in a second reading, or what is the issue? What is the issue that he's presented? What is triggering this teaching? What is the problem, or what is the what is the question, or what is the difficulty that people that before they move to Eretz Israel, what's happening? Anyone?
Well, maybe they just thought of Israel or Eretz Israel as the way it was described in the Torah.
Yes.
And so it was something like, which was maybe not imaginary, but it's a vision from the past, a vision. But
Right.
it's also from the past. It's a vision from the past, which is kind of difficult to say because the two words are contradictory.
Right. Vision is usually from the future. In a
for the future. And
so they had like a dissonance. How could it be that something that is described in such high hyperbolic, right, terms, something that has such intense holiness could be in this world? Like they felt like it's impossible that something that is so elevated could actually exist in this world. And now that, so that's the question, how could something that is extremely holy actually have a presence in this world? How can we have both in this world that before they came to Eretz Israel, they thought it was impossible. That it was impossible that description of Eretz Israel would actually be able to be inhabited, right, in this world. Going back just a sec. Okay, let me just find myself. Okay. And now he's going to explain. ומפורש בתורתנו הקדושה, and the Holy Torah describes, מעלה קדושת ארץ ישראל כמה וכמה פעמים, and the Torah goes at length to describe the holiness of the land of Israel. והתורה בעצמה מפרשת כל גבולי ארץ ישראל לגודל מעלתה וקדושתה העצום. And even the Torah itself specifies all the boundaries and the loftiness and sanctity that exist in the land of Israel. על כן, therefore, לא היו יכולים לצייר לעצמם בעיניהם. Therefore, and like I want to pay attention a little bit to the language used. לא היו יכולים, they were not able to לצייר, to depict. It's a very visual language. לעצמם בעיניהם, in their eyes. They couldn't picture to themselves in their own eyes, שארץ ישראל יהיה בזה העולם. They couldn't see that in their own eyes, that the land of Israel will be in this world, עד אשר באו לשם, until they arrived there, וראו, and they saw, שארץ ישראל היא בזה העולם ממש, that the land of Israel is actually in this world, ממש, actually, fully, completely. So Rabbi Nachman is sometimes, not very infrequently, brings in proofs from the world itself, right, from our senses or from the way that we see the world, to prove a point in his Torah. And this story is very much about that. The experience of these people that contradicted the idealization of Eretz Israel was worthy of a Torah in Likutei Moharan that is going to teach us something, not only about, as you will see, not only about Eretz Israel, but about that kind of like, how do we call it when we have these like our experience doesn't match, our belief or our understanding of something, right? They thought Eretz Israel it was impossible that something that was described in such terms could exist in this world until they come and they saw it. And they were talking about that to Rabbi Nachman when he was visiting them, probably in Tiberias, I can imagine. Ki be'emet, because in fact, and now the word emet or be'emet, sorry, I just need to drink. The word emet, which means truth, is going to appear a bunch in this Torah and in different qualifications, which I think is another important element of this Torah. Ki be'emet, because in truth, Eretz Israel היא כמו מדינות אלו ממש, because in truth, be'emet, the land of Israel is like the other countries. Ve'afar ארץ ישראל, הוא במראה ודמות כמו עפר מדינות אלו ממש. And the dust of the land of Israel is exactly like the dust of the other lands, mamash, fully, completely. And now he's going to talk about how, and I'm just going to kind of tell you that instead of reading it, kind of like the fact that they bring the dust from, they would bring these bottles with a little bit of land. I think sometimes you see those things in the States. They bring like land, I don't know, like air from the Holy Land, or bring a little bit of like dirt from the Holy Land. So the fact that they brought, people brought a little bit of dirt from the Holy Land and it looked white for whatever reason, it sounds like. It was really because they were taking it for a particular place in the land of Israel, but it doesn't mean that the land of Israel was any special. And then it continues and says, however, I'll just read it in English because I'm just concerned about time. The majority of the soil of the land of Israel is exactly like the soil of these lands. And the fact is that in outward experience, there is no difference at all between the land of Israel and other lands. Lehavdil, then he says. Lehavdil means what? There's a difference. Lehavdil, right? We use that. That's a very, I don't know if Ashkenazi word, right? But like it's a word that when you want it, where you're comparing two things that seem to be very similar, but you still want to make sure that you're saying that there's a big difference, you use the word lehavdil. Nonetheless, it is extremely holy, supremely sanctified by an immense and awesome holiness. Praiseworthy is he who merits taking even 4 steps there. As our sages of blessed memory said, and all the holy works say in extolling its immensely great and awesome. Okay. I think somebody needs to mute because we're hearing somebody speaking in the background.
It's me, Sabrina. I'm sorry.
No,
I messed up for today. No, I'm actually not, but I will see you all. Happy New Year. Thank you. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Be well. Okay. And then he says like this. V'siper Rabbeinu, and our teacher told us, related, may his memory be a blessing, כי הוא עניין נצרך מאוד לכמה עניינים. That this thing of, on the one hand, having the land of Israel being very holy, but on the other hand, looking in appearance like any other land, is a concept that is very important to keep in mind or to have in other areas. שבני אדם נבוכים בהם בטעותים, that people are perplexed in their mistakes. כי יש טועים סוברים, because there are those who believe or hold, שצריכים להכיר את הצדיק או שאר דבר בקדושה, because they hold that we have to recognize a holy man or a tzaddik. We will talk a little bit about that concept, I hope. או שאר דבר בקדושה, or anything that holds holiness, להכירו בפניו, בצלמו ודמותו, that we have to recognize it in the way that it looks and appears. שיהיה משונה בדמותו ובתאונותיו דווקא, that he should be different in his image and in his appearance or his mannerisms, dafka, precisely. So what do we think of that? Do we agree with that kind of like conception that somehow we should be recognizing the holy on outward experience or an outward appearance, or not? Because Rabbi Nachman seems to say people think that you should be able to recognize something holy when you see it, but in fact that is not so. Because his claim is that in appearance, like the land of Israel, and he's going to go into other examples as well, in appearance, it appears exactly like any other land, and yet is extremely holy and supernaturally holy and holy, 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 holy. do we believe that? Do we have that kind of, or in what ways can we relate to that kind of mistake? What do you guys think? Or not? Or you believe like, no, I actually agree with Rabbi Nachman. I don't think there should be any expression and any outward expression of holiness to begin with, in general, like as a sign of holiness.
I think there's two aspects. There's one, I don't know whether I would use it as holiness necessarily, but if we can't recognize good qualities in our role models and our teachers, then we're apt to miss the lessons. So there have to be visible signs. But of course, we know that many good gestures and heroism are invisible. They're done silently when no one's looking. And I mean, I'm not saying this story to just the first one that occurs to me.
Yeah.
A friend of mine lost a scarf, and I went to look for the scarf, and I managed to find it without anybody knowing and returning it. It's just a very trite example, and it wasn't a holy act, but it was a little act of kindness, and it wouldn't have been visible to anybody. So I think there are, and it's not either or, it's both and.
Right. So I like what you're saying. You're saying on the one hand, there needs to be an external expression of a certain spiritual status, let's say, right? Like a person needs to show good character traits. You recognize somebody who's on a high level by, according to the Musar movement, for example, the more you work on your character traits and the more your behavior shows a certain, right, development, you see that person is equally developed spiritually. So in our tradition, that is very much true, right? Like a person who learns Torah, but that Torah doesn't show in their actions and doesn't show in how they treat others. And, in order to learn Torah, they're going to push people off the way. It's not a true expression of Torah by any means, right? So there needs to be a way to recognize the learning or the spiritual advancement in the externals on the one hand. So then you make a qualification here and say, well, is this what Rabbi Nachman is talking about? And Rabbi Nachman seems to be talking about holiness, something that is described as like so outside of this world. How could something that is described so outside of this world can enter into this reality? Right? How could Gan Eden enter into this reality? How could, purity enter into this in non-adulterated form, enter this reality? And it seems like he's saying people usually think that it cannot be. That it cannot be in this world. And not only that it cannot be in this world, he's saying people think that in order to recognize that, it has to be seen through our senses. Like somehow we need to use our eyes to be able to recognize. And then what he's going to say is that is not so. But I kind of want to open that up for you guys, because it's like, I was so glad, John, that you said what you said, because like it's true. It's like, is it so? Is it not so? Is that corroborated by the way that we see our own understanding of holiness or understanding of what something holy is, and the times that we have seen or experienced holiness in our lives, if we have?
Something that happened on Hanukkah was I can hardly stand, and I asked my caregiver to light the menorah, and she said, "No, I will hold you up so you can light the menorah yourself."
Beautiful. That's beautiful.
There's something in it also about, I guess, seeing God in this world. And if I look out, I'm looking out a window here where I sit, which with tremendous nature, beautiful nature out there. So am I looking at a tree, or am I looking at an aspect of holiness? And I guess it's a lot in the interpretation. And in what you want to bring to it, or what your goal, your inner
Right. You know,
How
it's
you want to live.
Linda, I love it when you guys share, because it helps me deepen my understanding, right? So the way that you said, like, you know, I can look at, it's like you first said, like, you know, is this about God in this world? Can God be in this world, right? And then you say, well, I'm surrounded by this beautiful nature and I can see a tree. And then I can see, is this a tree, either a tree or an expression, right? I'm adding words or switching a little bit to in the way that I understand you. Is this tree holiness, right? Is an expression. But the way you presented it was like it's either that or the other. And I'm not saying you precisely would make it a dichotomy, but it was interesting that sometimes we think in those ways. It can either be a tree or an expression of holiness or an expression of God, right? And I think that, I don't know, maybe I'm making too much out of it, but I think we do that, right? It's either one or the other. It's either, Eretz Israel is either outside somewhere in the Netherlands, right? Like somewhere like, or it cannot be here. And I think Rabbi Nachman is saying, you know, let's look at this. Let's pay attention. Let's pay attention. What are our conceptions of holiness, and what do we think holiness is about? And how could something so holy also fully be a country that is like no other, like completely the same as other countries? Any other ideas or questions? Yes, Anne.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about Shabbat. Shabbat as being a holy day and also in some sense an ordinary day, in that we walk outside and people are going about their business. Or, you know, or the bread that we eat on Shabbat, or any of these ordinary things. I'm trying to get a sense of whether Rabbi Nachman is talking about God, that type of holiness, or the outpouring, or the shefa, or is he talking about, because our lesson about Hanukkah, right, was that it only comes down to whatever it is, 10 feet or
Right.
4 feet.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right. In this dimension.
I think he's talking about developing a different type of vision.
Yes.
That's what he's basically talking about.
I agree. I think you nailed it. I think it is, he's talking about that, and we'll see how he takes it. There's something that you said that I wanted to comment on, and I lost it. So it might come back. But
okay.
oh, you were talking about Shabbat, right? And I was thinking it's true. Like Shabbat on the one hand is like considered to be me'en olam haba. It's an aspect of the world to come, right? It's also described in this like outside of this world experience or day or time. And yet the way we celebrate Shabbat also has a very important element of ta'anug, of physical pleasure associated with Shabbat, right? We eat a lot, right? And what somebody told me that, what was it? That there's 3 things that Rabbi Nachman said that you have to be mitzvah gdola. There's 3 things that Rabbi Nachman says there's a big mitzvah. One is to be besimcha, which we haven't even talked about simcha yet. And I feel like, oh my God, you can't believe that it's 7 sessions and we haven't talked about simcha, but we haven't. So the first one is mitzvah gdola liot besimcha tamid. The second one is mitzvah gdola. It's a big mitzvah to lechaded et hasechel, to sharpen your mind, your intellect. And somebody told me this week that there's a third one, which I think I forgot. I don't know. He said the third one is mitzvah gdola. It's a big mitzvah to eat a lot on Shabbat. It's like, oh my God, right? Like to enjoy the food, to eat a lot on Shabbat, to enter into this place of pleasure on Shabbat, right? Very mundane, very of this world, very on this like arba amot, right? The 4 cubits of this lower domain. All right, let's move on. So, but thank you for bringing Shabbat as an example, because I think it's related, as Rabbi Nachman says. This is necessary for in different areas. Okay, hold on. Okay, so now bet. ובאמת לא כן הוא. And in באמת, again, this word emet, and in reality, is translated as in reality. We could translate it as in reality, but it's, the word literally means, and in truth, it's not so. And I think this Torah is really talking about truth and the different complications with truth. Ki hatzadik, and now he's going to move from an explanation and this kind of dichotomy related to the holiness of the land of Israel, and he's going to move now to the same dichotomy that exists with the tzaddik, with the tzaddik is such a difficult word for me to translate, and I should have thought about how to translate this word. The righteous person, right? The tzaddik it's a big concept, especially in Hasidut and especially in Rabbi Nachman. So I'm going to leave it as tzaddik, righteous, holy, elevated teacher. So because the tzaddik who bidmut v'tzelem kechol ha'anashim, because a tzaddik is in appearance and resemblance like any other person. Ve'en bo shum shinui, and there isn't in him no difference. Ve'af al pi chen, and now he says, but nevertheless, but even so, hu Iniyan acher legamre. He is a different thing altogether. Iniyan acher legamre. It's like so strong, like it's a different thing altogether. Ushare bnei adam enam bedmut klal be'emet la'amito. And other people do not resemble him at all. Kamo she'amar Rabbeinu Zal, because as Rabbi Nachman said, she'ish hakasher, that a sincere, ish hakasher is also like a difficult thing to explain. Ish hakasher in Yiddish, I think, meant in those days like a sincere religious person, a person that is not looking to be this big Rebbe, or a person that is not looking to do any kind of outward expression of holiness, but is sincere in the sense that is like internal, and their pursuit comes from a place of internality. I think she'ish kasher nidme sheolech in karkashim vedakim kamo shar bnei adam, because a sincerely religious Jew may appear to have the same innards, karkashot vedakim, as anybody else, the same innards as anybody else. Af al pi chen hu inyan acher legamre. He is a thing completely different altogether. So now in this paragraph, I think he's bringing something surprising and kind of like one of those like turns that Rabbi Nachman makes. He's starting with the tzaddik that says what? In appearance, he's like everybody else, right? Like he's like any other man that you might meet, but he is inyan acher legamre. He's a different thing altogether. Inyan acher legamre is like so strong. It's like completely different. You may think that he's like any other man, but it's completely different. And then he says, but an ish kasher, a sincere Jew, ish kasher, appears that he's like his innards. Now he goes internal. Now he's not going external. He's not saying also for, kosher Jew, whatever, it's like that his appearance is like anybody else, but he's something else completely different fundamentally. Now he's going in. He's saying it may appear that his like whole internal system is like anybody else, but in fact, he's also an inyan acher legamre. So both the tzaddik and this kind of like sincere Jew share this quality of being an inyan acher legamre, of being something altogether different, for slightly different reasons, that creates this kind of like dissonance between the inside and the outside. And I'm very surprised by this reading, and this is something that I have never seen before until I prepared for this lesson for you guys. And I was like, wait, he's describing the inside of the kosher Jew and the outside of the tzaddik. And I wonder if you guys have any kind of insight into this comparison, because I'm a little bit like, there's something here and I don't know what it is, but there's something surprising in this comparison that I would love to see if you guys have any insight about it, because it doesn't feel like it's parallel. It's like skipping, like it's moving outside of that parallelism that he made with Eretz Israel, the tzaddik, and that this kosher Jew is different. Or maybe I'm not reading it correctly. What do you guys think?
Well, I learned something this week from watching a professor who studies Rebbe Nachman's sort of project from a literary point of view. And what he said, which was really interesting to me, is that what was happening in Ukraine and all over Eastern Europe at that time with this modernization was, for the first time ever, people were walking out into the world and you couldn't tell who was a Jew necessarily. And that had never happened before. You couldn't recognize your own people because of the way people were dressing. And so at least on that kind of superficial level, he might be telling his Hasidim that that's okay. You know, you can be holy without anyone recognizing who you are.
Beautiful. Beautiful. You know, that's interesting. Like he was Rabbi Nachman, I told you last week or the week before that he played chess with the enlightened crowd in Uman, right? Like he engaged with them and he had relationships with the professors that lived in Uman at the time. It looks like Uman was a center for Askala, for how do you say Askala? Enlightenment, Jewish enlightenment, or enlightenment in general in the Ukraine. And he was very criticized. Nachman was very criticized for many things, and his Hasidim were persecuted for all kinds of different things after his death. And during his life, he was also extremely criticized, and people had a lot of things against him. And this was one of them, right? The relationship with the enlightened Jews. And what you're saying, Anne, in a certain way, is like a very radical type of, right? Like you don't need the externals to show the internal. That there's a value internally that we need to consider in how we see others and maybe even how we see ourselves. And I think that I believe Rabbi Nachman really taught that in many different ways, you know. Any other insights at the moment before we move on? Okay. I still have that question. It's like, Eretz Israel באמת, and now he goes back to Eretz Israel. Why did I lose? Yes, please.
But I have a feeling the land of Israel and the tzaddik is on the same level. You know, on the appearance, it's not what it is, and inside it's different.
Yes.
So for me, it's just another example.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, what did you think? What made you think that I was not saying that?
No, because you were wondering if it was, I had the feeling you were.
No, I think what confused me, I agree with you 100% that he's making a very clear parallelism between the land of Israel and the tzaddik. Yes? But when he talks about the ish kasher, he's not talking about the appearance of the ish kasher. He's talking about the innards of the ish kasher, that we think, right? He says, a sincerely religious Jew may appear to have the same innards as everyone else, yet he's something altogether different. So why is he talking about the innards and not the outers? That's my question.
Oh,
why?
Okay.
Like, what is it about this sincere Jew think about the Tam and the Chacham. Yeah, the story of Tam, the simpleton and the sophisticate, right? Like that's the Ish Kasher. Like that sincere person that doesn't have to show anything to anybody, that is doing his work, that he's doing, right? Like he's like on a path and he doesn't have to prove himself to anybody. I think that's an Ish Kasher. And an Ish Kasher, he's saying even his innards, you may think that they appear to be like anybody else, but why the innards? Yet he's something altogether different. Maybe because we tend to minimize the Ish Kasher and think, yeah, he's just a simple person. Like there's nothing simple about him. And maybe Rabbi Nachman is saying, actually, you may think that his system, even his system, right? His like organs are the same. But even on that level, there's an element that is Iniyan acher legamre. There's something altogether different. It could be, I really don't know. I find it kind of like, I love it when Rabbi Nachman, I often feel like that everything doesn't align fully. Like there's still a lot of room for questioning and like understanding things a little bit more deeply. And now he says something incredible. וכן ארץ ישראל באמת היא מובדלת ומופרשת. He goes back to ארץ ישראל and says, ארץ ישראל is מובדלת, is separated and mufreshet, like those two very strong words of separation completely from משאר ארצות בכל ענייניה ובחינותיה. So Eretz Israel is completely separated, entirely distinct and separate from any other lands in all its aspects and bchinot and dimensions. ואמר רבנו ז"ל, and the Rebbe said, שארץ ישראל יש לה רקיע אחר משאר ארצות, that the land of Israel has a different sky from the other lands. כמובן בזוהר הקדוש בפרשת תרומה, as it is described in the Zohar, in the Parsha of Truma. Right, so that's like the Zohar says that the land of Israel has a different sky from the rest of the world. I don't know what that means. I love the light in Eretz Israel for sure. And I always feel like, I'm a very, very non-objective observer here. So I recognize that I'm like, I see Eretz Israel in high regard. And I'm just getting an understanding now, as I said that, which I'm glad I'll share with you. But in any case, right, so the Zohar says that it has a different sky. אף על פי כן, and nevertheless, בגשמיות לפי מראה עיני האדם. In the physical aspects, according to the vision of the eyes of people, of בני אדם, אין רואים שום שינוי בין ארץ ישראל לשאר הארצות. There's absolutely no difference between the land of Israel and the rest of the lands. כי אם, and this is what an important phrase, כי אם מי שזוכה להאמין בקדושתה, except for someone who has the merit to believe in its kedusha, in its holiness, יכול להבחין קצת ההפרש. Only somebody who has the merit to believe in the kedusha, in the holiness of Eretz Israel, can somewhat clarify or see the difference between them. Now, this is a little bit of explosive material, I think. Because what is he saying? He's saying there's absolutely no difference. I'm telling you, even though the Zohar says that we have a different sky, however we understand that, there's no difference. In reality, if we use our eyes, there's no difference. And the only way to tell the difference apart is to believe, is to have the merit to believe in that. Now, why do I say it's explosive? because we can trip a lot of people with that sentence. Disregard reality. If you have the emunah, if you have the belief, then you can see the difference apart, right? It can be extremely dangerous move to make, to say that it's a function of emunah. And yet Rabbi Nachman is saying it's a function of having emunah. So what is emunah? Like what do we understand believe or faith to be? That's a huge question. You know, I'm looking at the clock and seeing, like, do we, how much time we have to open that can of worms here, right? What is it?
Well, when I went to visit Israel, I had great intentions and faith and believing in the land to be holy, and I found it to be so. When I walked the land, I felt great depth of holiness, and even though I was in the American uniform, I could feel the great holiness of the people and the land and of God being there with me. And
Mhm.
the sky did have a different tint of a color.
No, I agree, right? Like there's a sense of like experiencing, I don't know if you've been to Israel, and if I'd be curious to know if you've been to Israel and what has been your experience. And I don't mean this to be a lesson in like rah 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 Israel, you know, by any means, right? Like although I love it and I'm so happy to be here, but part of the lesson is a lesson of being real and not tripping ourselves over imaginations, right? And recognizing those two dimensions that coexist. On the one hand, something very mundane and very, you know, and on the other hand, something extremely elevated. Yes, Elise.
But is it going back to the to what we say? We're going to have to do things, and it's by doing the things that you're going to get your emunah, your faith.
What do you mean do things? By actually
Yeah, well, that's the way that the concept that we saw a few weeks ago.
the Nasa Ishmael, we will do and we will
That's yes, so that's this concept. Maybe by doing, then you could get you back to your emunah, because otherwise that's kind of I don't know. I think it goes against it. You know, if you just say it's faith, no, you don't have faith by itself.
right.
You have
So
faith by
that's a thing. Like, what is faith? Like, when we talk about faith in Judaism, right? Right. But like, if we were to try to define, and again, it's not something that we can define, and it's what is faith? There's so many. I mean, we could like spend a whole hour now talking about, okay, what does the Torah say about faith, and what does the, you know, all the holy books and the Chachamim and the Zohar and all the things say about faith, right?
Well,
but I want to say just one thing that, yes,
going back to Shabbat, lighting the candles. You know, you're doing it.
The doing,
and it's an expression of your faith, but by doing it,
right? So it's
or singing, it's that you're singing on
for
Shabbat.
sure, for sure.
So,
it is true that in our tradition, the doing,
yes,
the capacity to create the inner, right?
Mhm.
Like there's a very strong connection between ritual, right, and spiritual development. That we have to do things, that we have to say things, that we have to engage in with our hands and our bodies, and it's very embodied. It's
Mhm.
true. But I think we can all agree, or I would ask you, I think we can be, I know, especially within a religious Orthodox community, right? And it's that people, we're so used to the doing that it can become automatic. And you're not even paying attention that you're doing. And it's good that you're doing, even without paying attention, is whatever, it's a good thing because you're still giving tzedakah, or you're still, right? But it's not internalized. It can happen like that, Elise, right? Like we can become so
Oh
used to
no, for me, it's the process of doing it. I'm not from an Orthodox
process of,
background.
okay,
So
right.
it's
So,
doing it.
so doing it, really doing it, right?
Yes,
Like
really, yes.
okay, so that's a holy doing, right? And an ideal doing. But let me go back to Emunah for a second, because I think that's the one of the teachings, right? Rabbi Nachman is saying there's no difference externally between the holy and the mundane. The holy looks exactly like the mundane, and don't be fooled by thinking that the holy has to look holy. The holy doesn't have to look holy. The holy looks like you and me, same. And then it says, but you should know that the holy is something completely different, like Iniyan legamre. And not only that, and that's not the end of the Torah. The Torah continues, says, but you can see the difference. And you can see the difference by what? By tapping into what is called emunah. Emunah, right? Now, emunah is a emunah is a complicated concept, because emunah can be used often as blind belief. Don't use your intellect, just believe. I can contradict. I don't get this week's materials. Okay, sorry, Brenda. I'm sorry about that, but I'm trying to get there, right? Like emunah can be something that can be misguiding. It can be manipulative. It can tell you, well, it's okay. The fact that it doesn't look holy, I'm going to tell you it is holy and you should believe it. And I'm trying to alert you to that dimension of emunah, that it in a certain way can be misguiding the person into fully engaging with the reality. I'll give you an example. And I don't want to get into politics at all. But as you probably know, there were elections in Israel recently, and the elections in a lot of sections of Israeli society are like concerning and, without getting into politics, I will say personally concerning and difficult to understand. And there's a lot of people that are very concerned about what's the future of the land of Israel going to look like. And a lot of people who are feeling that, kind of like a lot of Israelis saying that a lot of Israelis are leaving Israel and they don't want to be here, and they don't want to be here under this type of government and things like that. So on the outside, the country seems to be in a tremendous state of crisis. There's some people who believe that everything is good and it's fine. Okay. Some people see that, but within, like half the country in a certain way, right, believes the opposite. So one could say that this external reality of Israel right now in crisis, or democratic crisis, let's call it like that, is an expression of the fact that Israel is like, that Israel is letting us down, or that this land is not what it used to be. It doesn't have the holiness that we used to think. And a lot of my friends that are Israelis are talking like that. We're losing the land. We're losing a sense of like, this land used to be very special, not losing the land physically, but losing the specialty of the fact that we used to be so proud of this land, and now we're not, because what's going on in this country. And I think what Rabbi Nachman is saying is that if we tap into this concept of emunah, we can live with the land of Israel that on the outside is could be broken or incomplete or lacking or complicated or all those things, and still recognize that there's a holiness inherent in it. And for me, whether we believe that about the land of Israel is irrelevant to a certain degree, because what he's saying is not so much about only the land of Israel, but he's also saying that about the tzaddik and the kosher person, the sincere Jew, i.e., all of us in a certain way, right? The Jews are the people who are trying to get close to God, the people that are like in our sincerity, however known to us or not, are in a process of trying to come close to something bigger or something deeper or something more authentic or something more meaningful. And that thing can sometimes not have the brightest expression or doesn't have to be seen in the outside, but nevertheless still can contain the holiness inherent in it. Do you see what I'm trying to say? And I think that's a very, very important teaching for me now in Israel at this specific moment. And I think it's a very important teaching for us as people who are engaging in a spiritual path, or anybody that is engaged in any process of growth. That it is okay to have the dissonance between the outside and the inside. And that doesn't take away from the inherent value of Eretz Israel or the Tzaddik or any of us by definition or by extension. Any thoughts?
For me, what he's saying, I think, about this emunah in this sense is just the sort of basic rock or anchor, not necessarily a belief, but just to be rooted in that place that, yes, this land is holy for whatever reason. And in the same way that before we pray, we ask that their lips be open. That's a kind of faith as well, that we should be able to actually speak what is in our heart. We have to have a faith that some force can make that happen. And I guess there are other, so it's faith before belief, and it's faith before that kind of action or speech. And it's probably faith before virtually everything.
In Hebrew, it's a very interesting thing about the language, how the language is like whatever is beautiful language, in my opinion. Not only the way it sounds, but how it conveys concepts. And in Hebrew, leha'amin, the word emunah, first of all, is an incredible word, because emunah has the same root as artist. Oman is the same root. Creative person is the same root as omanut, right? Omanut, emunah are all the same root. And as you know, probably, right, in Hebrew, Hebrew is a root system language. So every word in Hebrew usually has a 3-root letter, right? And from that 3-root letter, a lot of different words are created, but all the meanings of those words are interconnected in each other. So emunah is aleph, mem, nun. Amen. Amen is the same word as emunah, and the same word as oman, which is an artist. And it means something amin. And amin in Hebrew means trustworthy. Emunah is a rootedness, is something that has a depth, something that has a standing, that stands rooted and can stand up, right? That's amin, trustworthy, upright, but grounded, right, in the ground, right? That's emunah. So in Hebrew, the way that the preposition that comes after emunah is emunah be. In Hebrew, the grammar is you always say emunah be, which means faith. Let me see how I translate that. Not faith. Not faith that something will happen, but emunah in be. In something, and the emunah is in usually understood as faith in God, but is in that kind of sense of like groundedness in the existence, in the involvement of God in this world, right? So when we're talking about emunah, we're not talking about emunah that something will happen, that something will be external, that there will be, that I believe in things outside, but it's an emunah that is internal, and that gives me a sense of standing in the world, that gives me a security. Usually the word emunah is very much used in the context of bitachon, security, a sense of like, I'm fully trusted in the stability of this world. That fundamentally is emunah. And is an emunah be. Be in Hebrew is like in something, right? Not she, that in something external. So when Rabbi Nachman is saying that we need to have emunah, we need to have the merit to have emunah in order to see the difference. Right, to be able to recognize the difference between the two. What is he really saying? What do you think he's saying? Why is emunah, this kind of like broader concept of emunah that I'm sharing with you today, could have in the ability to recognize the difference and to recognize the reality as coexisting at the same time, right? That Eretz Israel can actually be in this world, that Eretz Israel or something holy or something extraordinary can exist in this world and look ordinary, completely. Now we need to know that. That's lesson number one. But lesson number two is that we don't stay there, that everything is ordinary because we can't see the difference. It says, no, you should know that there is a difference and that the difference exists. And that difference you can see through developing this ability of emunah, of that kind of like sense of trust and security in the existence of God or in the involvement of God, however you want to define God at this moment.
When I was in Vietnam and we were being overrun in Saigon and we were in foxholes shooting our way, trying to save the base, I kept saying the Shema, and the girl next to me said, why do you keep saying that? And so I told her it's my faith in my God. And so she told me to teach her it. So I taught her it, and so she kept saying it, and we made it through. And I got shot in the side of my head. A bullet creased my scalp, and I didn't even know it, but I felt warmth from the blood on my ear. And she said, "You're bleeding." So I said it, and I felt it, but God made me get through it with my faith.
Wow.
But with pure faith in God, nothing else.
Yeah. Faith in God doesn't guarantee that we get the results that we want necessarily, right? Sometimes, I mean, whatever, like the whole topic of faith, and I feel like it is such a big topic and we don't have the wherewithal today to develop that. But I think that in a little bit what Brenda was sharing, that sense of like yetzivut, what is yetzivut in English? Stability. A stability that can recognize discrepancies, or that can recognize things that don't necessarily align, or when things are not consistent, that can still maintain a sense of stability vis-a-vis the world. That's something that can look so mundane, can also be so holy. Without it needing to be special.
I'm struck a little bit by the connection with Oman. You mentioned the artist, and it occurs to me, and this is again perhaps coming a little bit more from the Buddhist teachings, that we could speak about a sense of presence and have that linked with stability. And then when that presence is there and that stability is there, then the outside, what's outside us, whether it's a flower or a plant, we're more inclined to be able to see, recognize the presence in the world around us. And the artist, I think, draws attention to that. The poet or the painter is showing us that.
Yes. Thank you. That's a very beautiful way to describe it. I think there's like it's also a Torah that is talking about, we didn't go into that, and I feel like we're kind of like out of time to go into that. But if you were to go back to the Torah, there's like ways that Rabbi Nachman talks about truth. And I think at a certain point, he also says the truth of truth. I don't know. I think it's in the Torah, and it's in other Torahs of Rabbi Nachman, the concept of like there's truth, there's a layer of truth, and then there's layers of the truth of the truth. And I think that is, what you said, John, is reminding me of that, right? Like we can see the flower, and we can see the flower of the flower, right? Like the inner flower, but without idealizing the flower. That's the point. That is so, like, I've said it so many times in our time together, like it's so important. One of the things that I most appreciate about Rabbi Nachman is like Rabbi Nachman relates to the reality, relates to the experience, relates to the embodied expression of things, right? So we don't want to lose the actual flower when we are able to recognize the holy flower in the flower, right? He wants us to stay connected to both and not to expect that because you recognize the holiness in something, that thing is going to lose its mundane expression. And I think that is a very important teaching for anybody that is engaged in a spiritual practice. I don't know about other practices or other, forms of spirituality, but in Judaism it's essential because we can live in the ideal very easily. And then when the ideal doesn't match the real, then we crash. And I think that's what I was talking a little bit about what's happened when I see my friends in Israel going through. Like there's a crash. And I think Rabbi Nachman, in a certain ways, for me, at least today, is teaching me like, yeah, sometimes the reality can be very difficult and things are not always pretty. And whether you're like more on the right or more on the left, there's issues on both sides. And there's a core, right? That is Iniyan legamre, that is outside of that. But if you only stay there and you think it cannot be in this world and you become an escapist, then you're not what you're saying, Elise, and then you're not doing. And that's a terrible thing. So how do we stay connected to the doing and to the reality and to the messiness of the reality, and at the same time recognize that there's that together with that, there's a dimension that exists that is an Iniyan acher legamre, but also in ourselves, not just right in the ish kasher, in the simple, in the aspect of us that are simple Jews that we all have, right?
One thing that helps if you have a partner.
Yeah.
Another thing helps if you have a routine.
Mm. Yeah, those are very important elements in life, health, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. So any things that you guys take with you from today that you feel is relevant for your lives or for your realities today?
mind if I ask you, this is a personal question, are you a Bratslaver?
Right. So
Do you mind if
Yeah.
I'm sorry to.
Oh, very glad you did ask. I welcome all kinds of questions. I'm very happy to be asked questions. Yeah, I mean, for me to answer then to say yes, I'm a Breslauer is I cannot say it because I feel like to be a Breslauer is it's a very like it's high expectations of a Breslauer, but I am definitely a Breslauer in the making, you know, wanting to become a true Breslauer. Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for answering.
Of course. Yeah. Happy to answer. But what do you guys take from today, from this Torah? That's what I want to hear. Now I'm asking you. That's my turn.
I'll say just very quickly that this capacity of the world to be one thing and then something entirely different brings to me a quality of magical, something which is really rich and juicy. And I've always found that in Nachman, without ever leaving the ground. The feet, as you say, are planted, but the world has the capacity to be this ordinary and magical place at the same time. And it's the world that I want to live in.
Yeah. Yes. It's so important to have that today, I think.
I like the word that you just said in terms of juicy. It does make the world very juicy. And it is the kind of thing you do want, that juice of life. And very magical and mythical, and it brings another quality to life that I don't always have.
Yeah.
Or ever, or rarely have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I want to thank you for bringing back memories of my visit to Israel.
Israel, you're so welcome. It's wonderful to be, you know, teaching from here, I have to say.
One of my Kfar Zion cousins said, I told him I was taking this class. He said, be very careful. Maimonides is who you should be studying.
Oh my God, yes, of course.
He said, be very careful. Don't question everything, Linda.
That's a good idea. You should question everything.
Yes. He's a good person, you know.
Yeah, there's a lot of trust, unfortunately. Yeah, in general, like there's these two views, like the rationals and the mysticals, and they don't really always. But I don't. But again, you know, like I think what Rabbi Nachman has taught me is that those dichotomies are not unbridgeable. Like there aren't bridges. You know, when I was in school for becoming a therapist, I did a dance thing. I did an expression therapies school in Leslie, and I did this dance, and I had this dichotomy between, like, you know, on the one hand, the wisdom of the Torah and the wisdom that I so feel drawn to, and then on the other hand, the research of the, you know, therapies, and right, like I just could not bring them together. And then I had a wonderful therapist that helped me see that in myself, and through him, I did this final presentation for my master's, and it was a dance that was able to bridge that there was the relationship between the two was not necessarily an either or, but there was a bridge between them. And I needed to find the different bridges between them. I think Rabbi Nachman helps find those bridges. And again, not about leaving this world and becoming at all, but being very grounded and very real and asking the questions. And when it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. And when we don't get it, we don't get it. And when we disagree, it's okay. Right? Like
what you just said, I'm sorry. What you just said that seems so important when you said the doing it in dance, that we're the bridge. That's really beautiful. Thank you.
I'm taking with me the idea of somehow meriting emunah, meriting that solidity and rootedness, maybe through action. I'm not exactly sure how, but it really struck me that Rabbi Nachman thinks that belief is something that we have to merit, that
Yeah.
to live in that juicy place where things are and aren't what they seem.
That's something that we didn't talk about at all, meriting of Emunah, which is, yeah, to think of as if it's not something that we can earn. I don't know, like I have a lot of thoughts there that are not cooked or clear or like, but yeah. Any other insights or words before we end? So just give me a minute then. Next week will be our last session together. And I wonder if there's any kind of like, not for you guys to, if you have any requests or any questions or anything that you would like to kind of things that we didn't cover, which we didn't cover a lot, that you would like to learn about or have addressed, please send me an email, let me know. Because I would definitely will take it into account, even though I have my own idea of how to kind of close, but I feel like, you know, like I want to hear from you. If you want to share or if you have what to share, if not, it's okay. No. But I want to give you guys that opportunity if you want to take it. And I'll see you guys next week, God willing. I hope everybody can come and have a wonderful week and a happy new year.
Have a
Blessed.
nice
Thank you.
week. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. Thank you. Hi.
Bye.
Dina. Bye.
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 Bye. Okay, it's been recorded, so it's always like you know, it'll stay in the recording, so we cannot really talk because I don't want to
Right.
extend the recording like that. Hi, Ellie.
Hi,
And hi,
Dina.
and Sasha. Both of you are here. It's so great to have you. And we can actually, I can give you a call now, which we've been wanting to do. So let me give you a call, David. Yeah, I can't call you anyway. I can't call you because you don't have WhatsApp.
No,
But
it's too bad. I've been trying to learn how to use it. I haven't. There's something called it's an add-on, but I don't even know. I don't even know the first thing how to use it. So
some computers you can download WhatsApp.
download it, but I don't know how to. I think it's.
No?
I have to really work on it and figure it out. Yeah, that's why I'm calling Ima on my landline on her phone. So.
Right.
And by the way, every time he keeps saying, what was it? What was the expression about it's other
Iniyan,
than-
legamre? Yeah.
yeah, I keep thinking what Stanley always says, a totally different animal. Totally different animal. I keep thinking what Stanley always says all the time.
That's
Listen to
cute.
this chord. Do you want to hear this chord? It's a totally different animal.
An animal.
Yeah. I was
Awesome.
thinking a lot of what we were saying. It's really, really good. I mean, I was thinking of it's Shabbat, how you know, like
Right.
how the ordinary is opposed to, and you know, that weekend we spent together, that was like a
Nachman.
non-ordinary thing, you know, that that doesn't always happen.
Okay, Yeli.
Yeah.
Sending love. Take
Lots
good
of
care.
love. Love you a lot.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye, Turi.
Lots of love. Bye. Love you.
Wow.
Bye.